Please welcome to the show Dan Geltrude. Dan, we were talking off air. The Fed's going to do what the Fed's going to do, as you said. I'll take your line. And what do you think that is?
They are going to raise rates. Now, whether it's a full point or 0.75, well, that remains to be seen. But the problem here, Scott, is that this has become political. It hasn't become, let's say, mechanical from an economic standpoint. And the reason I say it's political, because this administration has decided that they're not going to change any policies related to the supply side, which is the key to this whole thing. But put that aside. They're looking at the Fed and they're saying, do something. You guys got to do something. So there's a lot of political pressure on Jerome Powell. Now, they're very limited as to what they can do. What can they do? Raise rates. Now, they start to raise rates, and eventually, Scott, we're going to get rid of inflation. But at what cost? So right now, we're going through a process of death by 1,000 cuts. This is going to keep going the way it is because the political will to do the right things is just not there.
And what would those right things be, do you think?
You and I have talked about it over and over. You have to deal with the supply side and specifically energy. So you have to do a 180 related to American energy policy. I just don't see Biden doing that. Right. You got to open up the pipelines. You got to start drilling. You got to start refining. You got to start building refineries. Now, those things don't happen overnight.
No, they
but
don't.
That's the long-term policy to secure America's economic independence, which is all of our power in the world, Scott.
Yeah, unfortunately, Dan, I think you're right. And you started with something that's very prescient. I believe that, slowly but surely, somehow, this Fed has been politicized, and I'm sure you're right, the pressure from the administration. And you don't want your Federal Reserve Bank to be that way, but unfortunately that looks to be the case because they're also trying to do it to the Supreme Court. So why wouldn't it happen to the Fed, right? I mean, that's going to be something we have to worry about. And also, if we've got a July 28th GDP coming out, and that should either confirm or not confirm a quote-unquote technical recession. But that is then ultimately up to the National Bureau of Economic Research. They're the ones that make that call, and they always have done. But even now they're getting politicized. I don't know if you've seen that, but they've come out and said, well, just because we have 2 negative growth quarters doesn't really necessarily mean, and we're in a recession. We have to throw jobs in there too. Well, they haven't never done that before. So that is why I think you're right, because if this is a nonpartisan group, National Bureau of Economic Research, if they're feeling the heat, the Fed's got to be feeling the heat, right?
They absolutely are. And if you look at what are we going to do now, we're going to change the definition of a recession,
Yeah.
right? So now if we adjust that definition of a recession, now magically we're no longer in a recession. So the political aspect of this, Scott, and the way it kind of can wash itself through is that people don't care about a definition of a recession, and they don't care about a lot of things that politicians and various talking heads get caught up in, right? They know they're hurting, and they know they need a change. And when that change happens in Congress and perhaps ultimately in the White House, then that'll be the wake-up call. But in the meantime, how much pain do we have to withstand between now and then until our policymakers ultimately wake up?
Right, because they can't change the definition of pain. They can't change the definition of not being able to buy food or fuel for my car. That's the problem. They can work on the margins and try to do something that makes things look a little bit better, even though they're not. And we've all seen that happen, actually, from both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter. But ultimately, the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding doesn't taste too good.
No, it doesn't. And Scott, do you mind if I touch on the housing situation right now? So we look at what's going on with the house building and those numbers and so on, and they stink on ice for that matter. So now what does that mean, and how will the Fed react? What do I think? The Fed will continue on its path, as we talked about, and raise rates. So we are having, in real estate, in my opinion, the perfect storm coming down the pike, because prices to build, prices of houses are all high. Why? Lack of inventory. And now on top of that, we're going to throw in rising interest rates.
Right.
So of course there's going to be a slowdown in the real estate market. Nobody can afford anything. So the Fed, in being politicized, is going to put the real estate market over the cliff with these interest rates. And again, that's supposed to solve the problem. I don't think so.
Now, inventory is going to solve the problem, Dan, and I have to let the Fed and the administration know that when you crash the economy to get out in front of inflation, you also crash business. And business isn't building anything when it's crashed, right? I mean, they're going to injure it so bad that nobody's going to build a new house in a recession. I mean, it's absolutely insane to think that that's going to be the case. So I think you're right. We need more inventory at the right time and the right places, and it's not going to happen with rising interest rates, no new inventory, and these builders with so many expenses through the roof just because of what their input prices are.
That's exactly it. Now, I ask you this, Scott. Why have you and I figured this out, and the people in Washington who are running the country can't figure this out? And I'll tell you why. It's because you and I don't have to worry about getting reelected.
100%.
We don't have any of that.
Well, I tell you what.
So, the viewers out there should realize that. We are talking about the facts. No spin.
You're exactly right, and you couldn't have said it better than that. You and I both don't have to worry about getting reelected. That doesn't cloud our view, and we just call it like it is. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not all that rosy. But you need to know the truth because it's not about the spin or the hype. It's about actually what's happening out there. And you're right. The Fed's going to push the housing market over that cliff, like they're going to do a lot of other businesses. And I say it all the time. Congratulations, we cured the patient of cancer, but because the patient's dead, right? That's the Fed's policy plan here, and unfortunately, that's where we're headed. And I'm sorry that that's going to have to be the case, but they're going to have to run this economy into a ditch. All right, enough of the bad news. It's been great having you on. Thank you very much, Dan Geltrude. He's coming to.